This is the video recording for week 3 of COMM 466T. This video recording will take the place of our in-person meeting on February 10th. What would probably work easiest would be for you to open the video in a separate window and be able to look at the Canvas module for week 3 while you're watching the video. The video won't be very long, but it'll allow you to see in Canvas the different elements that I'm talking about. So we're going to start first with a share screen, and it'll take us to that place in Canvas. Here we are. So this is where we are, week 3, February 10th. And this is what you need to be looking at as we go along: the supplementary readings, instructor notes, and the video link. The video link, of course, is not in this place right now because I'm building the video, so it will show up there for you. This week's focus is the concept of resiliency. This trait is important to all of us as human beings in a busy world. It is especially relevant to those of us who have worked or plan to work in the media professions. We've talked a lot in this class already about the resiliency that's needed to work in a very demanding creative profession that essentially is active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What kinds of personal characteristics do you need to work in the media profession? Well, I think a real big one is resiliency, even though resiliency isn't dealt with very much in the literature, and specifically not in the literature that deals with media communication. So there's a couple of quotes that I think are interesting. This one I've mentioned in class before. We are in a situation right now where I think we already know this. The 21st century is not going to be an easy time. We have already encountered scenarios that I don't think anybody expected, and we have to ask ourselves what else is coming, because surely there will be things. It will help you to begin this section by looking at the Resilience PowerPoint. This is a presentation that I created for the student agency. It works in context with this class, though, because it introduces you to the concept of resiliency, what it is, why it matters, and how we strengthen it. I'm going to just go ahead and open this for us in here so we can look at it briefly. You may want to go back on your own and read it more in depth. But this PowerPoint is about resilience and why it's important to all of us at work, no matter where it is you're going to work. This is a good definition for resilience here: the ability to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity and stress. This is another good one here: an ability to recover or easily adjust. And I think people who are mindful in the workplace are resilient. They can withstand stresses, or they can adjust and adapt in a stressful environment. These are some elements of a really good book that is identified down here that talks about the realities of our world, not always pleasant realities, but realities nonetheless. Things do end and change. They don't always go according to plan. This is just how things work. And rather than approaching life with a depressed, fatalistic viewpoint, it's probably better to approach life understanding that these 5 truths are in place and that we're going to need resilience to address them. Just like I need resilience right now to sit here and make this recording with all the noise that's going by in this very noisy world that I'm in, with vehicles around me, vehicles in the air above me, all kinds of things going on. But hey, when you shoot video outdoors, that's what you get. So there's an instrument buried in here called How Resilient Are You? And let's go back over here. There's the PowerPoint we're looking at right now. And here's the resilience instrument. It seems that you're not going to be able to download it from the PowerPoint, so you might want to just download it from here. It's a Word document. If you can print it out and put your answers in there, that would be great. If you can't, that's okay too, because you can just do it right there in the computer. Let me go back to screen share and show you what that resilience instrument looks like. So this is the Resilience at Work instrument, and it has 20 questions on here that I'd like you to put an answer in for. As with other instruments of this type, don't think about it too much. Just get in here and read the questions and put a check mark here to the one response that seems best for you. Like number one, I have important core values I hold fast to in my work life. So just put a check mark where it seems best. Go through all 20, put your check marks in there, and then just kind of set it aside, because we'll come back to the interpretation of the instrument here at the end. So let's go back to sharing again. And we're going to go to the module, back to the module. So here we go. So once you've read through the PowerPoint and done the resilience instrument, just set the instrument aside and let's look through some of these other things and talk about them. There's a link here to a 52-minute audio presentation. Consider whether you want to listen to that or not. I think it might be a good idea. The topic of this from Roshi Joan Halifax is buoyancy rather than burnout in our lives. She has an amazing background. She's an anthropologist by training. She's been all over the world. A lot of the work that she does now involves being in hospices with dying people. She has sat on death row with death row inmates. There is a connection between she and I, though we have never met. We were working at the same time with a particular case in New Mexico. Back when I was a reporter, there was a man who had been brought up on charges that he kidnapped and raped and then murdered an 8-year-old girl. His name was Terry Clark. And when I was a young reporter in Roswell, New Mexico, I covered the Terry Clark case and attended post-trial hearings for him. And he subsequently, he was convicted and he went to the state penitentiary at Santa Fe. And Joan Halifax, she was contacted by Terry Clark, and ultimately she became his spiritual guide while he was in the penitentiary at Santa Fe. And she sat with him many hours. And on the night of his execution, she was one of the last people to see him before he was executed. And when you talk about somebody who puts themselves in that situation, working in hospices with dying people, with terminally ill people, sitting with inmates on death row, that's a person who has quite a lot of resilience, because many of us could not do that kind of thing at all. And she talks about it as bearing witness. In other words, she can't change the unpleasant things of life. She can't change people's physical illness. She can't make somebody who's terminal with cancer better again, but she wants to bear witness to what's happening. She wants to be there to see what's happening, to have her eyes wide open to what's going on in this world. And aside from the religious issues that she clearly has with that, I think for all of us as mindful people, even approaching mindfulness from a secular standpoint, it's appropriate for us to bear witness, to have our eyes open to everything that happens in the world, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. She has written a book that I recently read that I think is very relevant to us. The book is called Standing at the Edge, and I'll talk about that for a minute. The thesis, if you will, of the book is that we all want to have compassion. For example, we want to have compassion for people who need it. And yet, for example, if you have too much compassion, you can easily be drawn into someone's drama, if you will. If you have too much compassion, you become part of the problem, not part of the solution. And her book talks about that kind of idea. That's what she's talking about when she says standing at the edge. And specifically, the areas of her book where she talks about these concepts. The first one is altruism. We all want to be altruistic. We want to give our time and our energy to help other people. Altruism is a good thing. On the other hand, if you become too altruistic, you give too much of your time and energy and attention to helping others, it becomes what she calls pathological altruism. It's help that really hurts people. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for you. So there is a point with altruism where we stand on the edge. We want to help other people, and yet we don't want to be a wet blanket that smothers other people. The same is true with empathy. We can have empathy for other people. We can want to help people when they're in distress. But at the same time, we can find ourselves in a situation where we are empathetic for other people. We understand and we feel for their suffering, but it's possible in some cases to feel so much for somebody's suffering that you're not helping them. You're not truly being compassionate. You are perhaps just furthering their suffering because of the attention you're giving to it. So empathy also is somewhere where we would want to stand on the edge and be helpful to people, but not hindering of them. Another topic of her book is integrity. We can live with integrity. We can make good ethical decisions and not take advantage of other people, not take advantage of situations. But there too, sometimes you can work so hard to be ethical, moral, upstanding that in your quest to be moral, you don't really pay attention to a situation that needs your attention. Sometimes you have to break the rules to fix a situation. So, integrity is another concept where we kind of stand on the edge, ideally, and look at each situation individually. And there are others in her book, but that kind of gives you an idea of what she's looking at in the book, Standing at the Edge. For all of us, I think the bottom line question when we want to help other people is our help, are we being objective in this? Can we really see objectively how we should help other people? And how do we know that our help is really going to help them and not enable them? Because if we enable people to remain in their suffering or their pain or whatever, we're not really helping them, and we're not helping ourselves either. I've got linked here another Joan Halifax YouTube. This is a 12-minute video about grace, which means to cultivate compassion while working with others. And regardless of your spiritual or religious preference or not, I think we would all agree it's appropriate to cultivate compassion while working with others. And if you care to watch that, that's a 12-minute video where she talks about those things. Now, I want to take a few minutes and talk about some notes that I have here that will help us think more about resiliency and what it means in the context of mindfulness. The first one is happiness versus meaningfulness. The question for us here is, are you living a happy life or are you living a meaningful life? A happy life would presumably be one that's full of pleasure. If you live a happy life, there's a lot of pleasure in your life. Things are going well. You're enjoying things, good times. That's the hedonic part of things. I'm living a happy, pleasureful experience. But living a happy life doesn't mean that you're living a meaningful life. Um, when Joan Halifax goes to volunteer in a hospice or sit with an inmate on death row, that's not a happy experience. Nobody would call that happy, but it's a meaningful experience. It's meaningful for her. It's meaningful for the person she's sitting with. So meaningful, a meaningful life is about making a contribution. And so the suggestion here is, and I've read several different books and articles talking about this, and it's something that we can all think about. Are you living a life that is happy, or are you living a life that is meaningful? I think you'd want to have a balance somewhere there in the middle. You could live a completely happy life and have there not be any meaning to it whatsoever. And think about your favorite popular celebrity, or somebody in a reality TV show, somebody like that. Let's just pull one out of the air. Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton probably lives a very happy life. She's got a lot of money. She's got cars and houses and dogs and clothes and purses and makeup and all that kind of stuff. What does she really do that's meaningful? And if she's one of your favorite celebrities, I'm sorry. What does Paris Hilton do that is meaningful? I don't know. Maybe she does something that's meaningful, but I don't know what it is. Um, on the other hand, we all know people who can live a meaningful life. Often these are people who work hard. They serve others. They're constantly toiling away to make things better. Are they really happy doing that, or are they just living a life of service 7 days a week and not really taking any time out for themselves? So um, think about these things and where the balance is to happiness versus meaningfulness. Viktor Frankl, who is a theologian, a scholar who survived the Nazi death camps, um, writes about the existential vacuum. People who live but don't feel meaning and purpose in their life. And he's written about how, in his experience, the people who survived the Nazi death camps, the people who made it out alive, were very often those who had a sense of meaning and purpose. They intended, they mindfully intended they were going to get out of there. They were not going to perish in the death camps. And many people who survived credit their survival to that sense of meaningfulness and purpose. Which then takes us to the question of, what does our society value? Do we really value meaningfulness in our society, or do we value happiness? And I think that you can turn on the television and get your answer to that. Um, Television is filled with all kinds of messages that what it's really about in life is to be happy. And you'll be happier if you have a new car of a particular brand, and you drink this type of beer, and you wear these kinds of clothes, and you go to these vacation spots where happy people go. And so often our media, not just television, but our media and our society in general, through advertising, through public relations, through marketing, um, they tell us that what we should really value is happiness, more so than meaningfulness. And, in a world filled with celebrity, vanity, fame, wealth, notoriety, um, happiness seems to be what a lot of people are chasing. And so that's a question that, as mindful practitioners, we should ask ourselves. The concept of tragic optimism comes into play here, especially in times like these that we're in, where we have a pandemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of people. We are isolated in our homes. We can't have the kind of educational or career experience we would like. We can't get together with family and friends the way we'd like. Our political system is broken. Our constitution is challenged. The environment is choking us to death, or we are choking the environment to death. You could make a lengthy list of all that is tragically wrong with this world. But then tragic optimism says, even in the face of that, even in the face of that, I can have hope for the future. I can look at things mindfully and have hope that things will get better. Um, and tragic optimism is probably a good state to have, mindfully speaking, even though so much of what we see in media content works against that. I mean, think about school shootings. How awful is that? And they happen again and again and again. School shootings, workplace shootings. The Cal State Fullerton, sadly and unfortunately, was the scene of one of the very first mass shootings on a school campus. And it happened in the library. And if you want to know more about it, you can Google search and find the answer to that. But Cal State Fullerton, sadly, was one of the first places where people were killed by a shooter in a workplace, in an educational place. What what is the media reaction to school shootings these days? Um, the media tends to demonize the shooter. The media look for all the ways that the the shooter was mentally ill, or uh, people should have seen this coming. The shooter planned this. The shooter is evil. Uh, the media demonize the shooter, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing to do, but that is a very distinct point of view that is being given to all of us, that shooters should be demonized through the media because of the horrible things that they did, and that automatically makes them a horrible person. Um, there, at some point, we should probably step back and question that. Um, a mass shooter is clearly someone who is not mentally well. But is it appropriate for us to demonize that person? Maybe we should step back and look at the other factors in the environment that may have made that person unwell. Untreated mental illness. Maybe that person was bullied. Maybe that person was watching all of this media content that says the way to address things you don't like in the world is to be very aggressive and come out against them. Um, those I think are things worth considering. And I'm not saying that we should um, give a shooter a free pass. No way. But we have to ask, how did that person get that way? And I think if you look over time at the media stories about um, school shooters, that the media very rarely does that. Um, More recently, we've had the Capitol riots in Washington, D.C. Okay, we look at that and we see groups of angry, disaffected people who could not accept the facts. They could not accept the outcome of an election that all 50 states say was fair. Um, these angry, disaffected people didn't get what they wanted. And so they went out and, in a large mob, broke the law. And while clearly that's not right, and that doesn't give them a free pass, certainly not, um, we perhaps ought to step back in a place of mindfulness and think more about what are the media messages these people were getting and sharing on social media. What is it that allows these people to create for themselves a completely different um, view of the world than what we have? Clearly, it's not tragic optimism. The people who broke into the Capitol and looted and ransacked and desecrated that building are not people with tragic optimism at all. They are angry, disaffected people who cannot accept the facts put in front of them. And rather than demonizing them necessarily, we should probably step back and think from a bigger perspective, what makes them that way? How did they get that way? And how are we as a society ever going to move past that? The last example I'd give in this regard is 9/11. Um, what was the national reaction on 9/11? Uh, we went to war, and people were plenty happy to go to war, and we um, we pointed out Muslims and people of similar faiths in our communities around us, and we made them scapegoats for what happened. And we, the United States, we were looking for enemies to attack to get retribution for what was done to us, and I put that in quotes, us, what was done to us on 9/11. Um, there was the president of the United States said we were going to go to war to take out the weapons of mass destruction that turned out to not even really exist, and it was not the weapons of mass destruction that came and attacked us. Um, so, in all of these kinds of things, all of this kind of goes back to the heading of what does our society value? Very often, our society can take an aggressive posture very quickly after an event happens, and we can lash out with a level of anger and hostility far greater than that what was shown to us. And perhaps as individuals, we need to think of that also, because there are times when each one of us has felt hurt from another person, and we lash out with much greater intensity than the initial hurt really was. So, more ideas of mindfulness to think about. Okay, this next part, Four Pillars of Meaning. Emily Estefani Smith is the author of a book called The Power of Meaning. And in that book, she talks about these four things: a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, storytelling, and transcendence. What does that all mean? What this means is, Emily says, to live a good life, you must have a sense of these four things. You must have meaning in your life. Meaning comes about through a sense of purpose. You develop your own identity, you give back to society, you reflect on your life, you look for an opportunity to serve. That's a sense of purpose. I know why I'm here. I'm here to give back. I look for opportunities to serve. I regularly reflect on my own life, and I understand what it's all about. A sense of belonging in a relationship and in a community where you feel valued. You're valued for who you are and not just what you offer. That is a sense of belonging. I belong in this community. I belong in this family. I belong in this relationship. I am valued for me and not just for what I bring to this relationship or this community. That's very important. So, a sense of purpose. I know why I'm here. I know what I'm supposed to do. A sense of belonging. I'm appreciated for my presence, and I feel valued. Storytelling. This is the story we tell of ourself. Who am I? How do I reflect my values, my beliefs? What do I tell other people about me? What do I not tell other people about me? How do I communicate with other people about the world? That is storytelling. We do storytelling all the time with other people. And in our own head, we talk to ourselves about who we are and what we think and what we believe. That is an important element of bringing meaning to your life, because meaning comes about in part through the stories you tell others and the stories you tell yourself. And the last, transcendence. Do you feel connected to something bigger than yourself? Do you feel committed to something bigger than yourself? Or are you just going through life one day at a time, one project at a time, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, work? I mean, what are you here for? Do you feel connected to something bigger? That is transcendence. And that is the fourth of these elements that allow your life to have meaning, Emily Estefani Smith says. Actually, it's Emily S. Fahani. There's no T in there. Emily S. Fahani Smith. Okay, but all of these taken to the extreme can be problematic. And so in that sense, Emily is kind of following along the lines of what Roshi Jones says up here. All of these can be taken to the extreme, and that's where you can go wrong. So a sense of purpose, for example, the people who went to Washington and looted the Capitol, they had a sense of purpose, but that purpose became tribalism, it became violence, it became their disaffectedness with government. I read a story that said many of the people who went and looted the Capitol and were complaining about the election had not actually voted. Wow, think about that disconnect for a minute. You didn't vote, but you felt the election was stolen from you. You didn't vote. Yeah, anyway, we could go on with that. But anyway, so you can take a sense of purpose to the extreme. The same goes for shooters who go in and shoot up a workplace or shoot up a school. They feel like their sense of purpose is to punish people for something, and it becomes awful. Angry people feeding off the anger of other people or the anger they see in social media, whatever, that can really take you off the rails. So a sense of purpose can go too far. Likewise, a sense of belonging can go too far. If you have joined a radical political group that talks about hanging or assassinating members of Congress, that sense of belonging for you has gone too far. But often, once people get that deep in these groups, they don't see it anymore. And then storytelling. And before I leave sense of belonging, think about groups that are good to be a part of and not good to be a part of. A political party might be good to belong to. It might be good to belong to a political party. At what point does that party get so extreme that it threatens our very society, and your belonging there is problematic? A neighborhood group might be good to belong to. When does a neighborhood group become a gang? A church, a religion is good to belong to, but what happened with Jim Jones and his followers in Guyana when they all drank the Kool-Aid? They died. So religion, a sense of belonging to a religious group, can be good, but it can also go too far. And in a professional group as well, it's good to belong to a professional group, but at some point, what if you don't see the limits of your profession and you think everybody has to do things the way you do? So anything that puts us into an exclusive group, that's a sense of belonging, can be good, but it can also go too far. When does it go too far, and how do you know? A lot of people, when they've gone too far, they don't know. Along those lines comes storytelling. These groups all tell stories about themselves. There was a story not long ago, I don't remember what part of the country it's in, where there is I think it's Minnesota, where a church has moved into a small community, and the church is a Christian religious organization that only allows white people because it believes only white people hold the truth and only white people can align with this religious ideology. And the people of this church, they say, well, they don't have a problem with black people. They just don't allow them in their church because the black people cannot see the truth or be part of the truth. And that is storytelling gone too far. You have told a story that is in the argument of religious faith. Your story has gone beyond the bounds of what ought to be acceptable in a society. So, just as with what Roshi Jones set up here, standing on the edge, with compassion and empathy and things like that, you can be too compassionate, you can be too empathetic. Down here, these are the four things that bring meaning to life, but they can also go too far. And how do we maintain a sense of objectivity to know that we have gone too far or not gone too far? And if you feel you've gone too far, then what? How do you get out of it? And where do you go from there? Sometimes when you get into these extreme groups, you can't get out. What happens then? So that's something to think about. This topic, the American dream, we all hear this cliche all the time. The American dream. The American dream, that's storytelling. That's us telling a story that has been told over and over and over again to the point where it's a cliche. What is the American dream? Is it a little house with a nice lawn and a picket fence and a garage with 2 cars in it? What is it? I think it would help all of us to think a lot about what the American dream is. Is it about material prosperity? Or is it about a collective sense of purpose? Is it about social justice for all the people that live here? Is it about professional fulfillment? Is it happiness? Is it meaningfulness? What is it? I think the American dream has been tossed around so much as an idea that perhaps we have lost sight of what it really is. Does it mean the same thing for everybody? I don't know. But these are things that you might want to think about in context with this topic this week. What is the American dream, and what does it take to be fulfilled in the American dream? And why is it an American dream? Why wouldn't it be a dream for everyone, regardless of where they live? Shouldn't everybody want happiness and fulfillment? Why does that have to be exclusively American? And then that also takes us to the idea of American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism is the political philosophy, political and economic philosophy, that we in the United States of America are the best people on the planet. We have all the right ideas. Our government is best. Our social system is best. We are exceptional. We are above everybody else. And that's something we probably ought to think about also. The American dream and American exceptionalism go hand in hand. Are those really realistic, or are those just stories we've been telling ourselves to pump ourselves up and to make us think that we are better than other people? Because people who don't live in America wouldn't have the American dream and wouldn't be exceptional. Other people in other parts of the world would be less than exceptional. Something to think about. Neuroplasticity. We'll talk more about this later in the semester. What is this? Neuroplasticity is the idea, and this guy here, Richard Davidson, he talks about it in this video, which you should probably watch because it's how mindfulness changes the emotional life of our brains. Neuroplasticity is the idea that the way you think can actually physiologically change your brain over time. It's the idea that the way we think is not fixed. It can change, and the physiological means of thinking can change based on what your practice is. That a mindful person could train themselves through mindfulness to think differently. There's also a kind of a cliched statement, neurons that fire together wire together. So that if over time you adopted an attitude of mindfulness, it would become easier to you to be mindful in the future, because neurons that fire together wire together, and it would come more easily to you. So watch this video when you get a chance and see what you think about that, because that's an interesting concept. Okay, we're going to wrap this up by going back to that instrument that I asked you to look at. And let me call that up in sharing here. Let's go to screen sharing. We'll stop this share. We'll go back to screen sharing over here. This is the instrument that we looked at to begin here, Resilience at Work instrument. We're going to stop that share, and we're going to go and look at a garden blower nearby. No, we're not. We're going to look at this, determining your level of resilience. This is the interpretation document that is linked in Canvas. So after you've added up all your numbers on that other sheet and you've come up with your totals, then look at the column where you have X marks and multiply by the number at the top to get the column score. That's what you did before. Add up all the column scores, divide by 20. A final higher score suggests greater resilience at work. Now, those questions, those 20 questions, they actually divide into these areas. The first 3, living authentically. I have important core values. I have the ability to change my mood. I know my personal strengths. That is living an authentic life. It's an important element of resilience. The next 4, finding your calling. The work I do helps fulfill my sense of purpose. I feel I belong here. This work fits with my values. I appreciate what I have in my work environment. The next 3, maintaining perspective. When things go wrong, it doesn't overshadow my whole life. I don't totally go off the deep end. When I'm working, nothing bothers me for long. I can move on. Negative people don't pull me down. This is maintaining perspective, obviously very important for mindfulness. The next 4, mastering stress. You can read for yourself, unless you're so stressed right now you can't think straight or see straight. Those are the 4 that talk about mastering stress. The next 2, team interactions. How well do you work with other people on a team? Do you get feedback or whatever? The next 2, personal health. The next 2, or the last 2, networking and mentoring. So down here is the interpretation. What this instrument is looking for is to have you see the extent to which your scores suggest you are living authentically, finding your calling, maintaining perspective, mastering stress, interacting well with others, that you're healthy, and you engage in networking and mentoring with others. These are from this source up here. I just kind of moved them around on this document here. I haven't changed any of the content. I just moved them around to make them fit with what we have going on here. Because ultimately, resilience is so important. It's so important for anybody of any professional persuasion, but it's particularly important for those of us who are in the media professions or going into the media professions. So I hope that through what I've shown you this week and what I've talked you through, and through these other resources that we've looked at, you will be more interested in the concept of, I'm trying to stop the sharing right now. We're going to go back over here. There we are. I hope that you'll be more interested in the concept of resilience And I hope that you will see more clearly how resilience relates to mindfulness. And I hope that these ideas will also help perhaps direct you towards some topics you want to investigate later in the class as we continue going through this class on mindfulness and media content. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy your week, and I will see you again at our next get together, which will happen a week from today. Well, if today is the 10th, if you're watching this on the 10th, you've got the syllabus. You know where we are. Yeah, February 10th. Our next meeting is on February 17th, and we'll start talking about communication theories and frameworks there, which is also very relevant to what we're doing here. So we're going to stop the share, and we're going to stop the video. Thank you very much.